Hey everyone, I'm back after a little over a month. It's been a very busy October, but I'm back with a lot of stuff to talk about. So first, I'd just like to highlight here in the pause menu, if I go into the summary of a character, I now have an image displaying. And this is going to relate to something else, but I have a sprite for the character. Now, this UI is not really designed or whatever, but what I do, my approach to UI is put in all the code that makes all the proper information display, and then I'll make sure I have all of the information that I want to show before designing a UI around it. But I needed the characters to be associated with an image for another reason. I put it in here as well. And then I'll just show for the protagonist here. I put this, just character portrait I drew a while back, but that's probably not final. I might have different options for the character face or whatever. But then if we go into the battle system, when it's our turn, you see this swoop in here. But the idea I had was to highlight more who's action it's going to be. So I put in sort of a rudimentary wheel for now. So the protagonist, the shepherd, the lumberjack. What I still need to work on, and this is not finished, is here I put in a fourth one as a dummy, but I don't actually have a fourth member in my party. So I need to put in code that makes it skip over when there's somebody not there. This is one that I hard coded into the UI and I just have to delete it. But right now, if I cycle through, it'll get off. See, now it's showing this for the lumberjack. But all I need to do is have it skip over whenever we don't have a full party. But the idea was that I wanted to be able to show party members down here without it getting in the way of the summon minions you're also going to have on the actual field and the ones that the enemies are going to have and the enemies. So I thought here out of the way was alright. My other option was to have instead of displaying their sprites or drawing back sprites for all of the characters, was to have these bars extend up in different places 1, 2, 3, 4, and then try to track which bar they go to, so that when a spell animations from the enemies that they would go and attack or they would go and hit say they launch an arrow and it attacks this guy, and then that corresponds to that bar. But I thought that would be a little messy. So what I think I'm going to do instead is that I'm going to have, let's say, a single target. They decide to attack this character. Then on your turn, you're cycling through them. But then on their turn, when they attack, it'll swap to the one they're attacking, and I'll play a little animation here for a single target attack. I also have, but I don't have the code worked up for it, all 4 of them will appear instead of on a wheel horizontally across here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then that might just show up whenever you or your enemy is targeting all of them. So let's say spells, cure all. Right now I have it targeting with arrows, but instead it would show the sprites of all of them, and then it would highlight everybody that you're casting it on, or they would pop up to appear as the target for an attack that an animation would display across the entire bottom of the screen. And I think once I finalize that, and this is all very rudimentary, it'll look pretty good. The next thing that you may have seen here is that I have a description box for all of the spells. So now the spells or skills, the data in the game engine are associated with a description, and now it pulls that up. I also use that for the item menu. And another thing about selecting spells is that I now have visible tags, and this needs to be cleaned up, not just this ugly yellow box or whatever. And this will be shortened so that this is out of the way. I'm going to have a better looking animation for selecting instead of this little arrow, but it'll also be out of the way because this will be shorter. These tags might be represented by icons instead of these longer boxes. And what I want to do also is have this all pushed to the left, where if I don't have these tags, then this appears at the beginning, but then the whole menu sort of starts halfway down. But why do I have the tags? That's a very important thing. So this is what I've been thinking about for a while designing the skills. I had showed in another video my table of skills that I had come up with, and a lot of them were passives that help the different classes that you can recruit in the game feel like themselves, feel unique. But a lot of them were passives. And I realized I need more attacks and active abilities. And if I have passives that say boost fire damage, well, then I need to define which skills are fire. So I broke down sort of the anatomy of a skill, and what we have is skills can be magical or non-magical. I'm considering everything that costs any MP to be magical. There's no magic tag, but if it costs MP, it's magic. We have melee and ranged attacks, which I'm representing by either having a tag that is ranged or not. If it's not ranged, then it's melee. Then we have separate, and we can have them both elemental or sort of type tags, and then a melee damage type. So let me explain. In this game, when you're being able to, let's say, fuse a warrior and a mage and get a spell sword or a battle mage or a magic knight. I wanted a mechanical difference between melee attacks, elemental magic, and like melee attacks that are enhanced by elemental magic, because that's how I'm going to give the sort of feeling that each of these classes are mechanically different. And so I needed to break down the anatomy of a skill. And what I thought is, okay, let's say you have a knight that can attack with swords. Then you have a fire mage that can attack with fireballs. And you can have a magic knight that can attack with a flaming sword. Well, that flaming sword attack really should be able to have properties of fire and of cut attacks or slashing attacks or whatever I end up calling it. And same with if you use a flaming arrow, how is that different than a flaming fireball? Well, is it a flaming pierce attack? Well, then I need both those properties. So for now, here's what I have in mind. Attacks, if they have a melee type, like they have some physical damage component, will have either slashing, smashing or bashing or blunt attacks and piercing attacks. And those need to have properties. And what I have in mind so far is piercing attacks, ignoring some level of defense buffs, smashing attacks, which I already had one that kind of was that concept, was a skill that you attack, it does blunt damage, and what that means is that it actually like scatters some of their minions. Like it has sort of a shockwave effect. It has a chance to scatter some of their minions. And then for slash and cut, I'm not quite too sure because I wanted it to stay. I had an ability called like cleave that would cleave across like this, like hit that guy, hit that guy. Actually, I'll just show it, right? And it'll do that. But what is the property of a cut ability? Oh, well, okay. I programmed this to move up when it's your turn. I didn't program it to move away yet. Sorry, what that is, here, we'll fix that. With the cleave ability, right? What's the property of a slashing attack that doesn't hit multiple targets, right? So, and the only thing I thought of so far was that it does extra damage on criticals. I might come up with something better, but I want to separate single and multi-target as a property, the melee cut, bash, pierce is a property, then elemental types, and I don't have elemental weaknesses, right? Because when I have all these humanoid enemies, like, okay, it might feel natural for a druid that is covered in plants to be weak to fire, but what is this guy weak to? Ice, lightning, like it wouldn't be intuitive. So I want fire abilities to feel like fire in that they inflict burning a lot of the time. Ice, probably a lot of the abilities that are ice slow you down, like either decrease your agility or inflict turns of sleep or something. Maybe take time off of the battle clock. There's like electrical magic. Maybe it arcs between enemies. But they all have like unique properties that feel like what you're doing. You could have poison as one of them, but that doesn't mean that every fire spell has to have a chance of burning. It just has to have something that makes it feel like fire. And having the tag will have it be amplified by other abilities. So maybe one ability will increase damage of anyone with the fire tag. Maybe some of them decrease the MP cost. But that doesn't mean that they all... In a lot of games, like having it be a fire element, that's a property that what it means. What do fire spells do? Well, what they do is do extra damage to things that are weak to fire spells. And I wanted to have more interesting effects than that, but also have sort of indication of what they are so that they can be affected by other abilities. So tying them together, but loosely so that they can have unique properties. Well, if that makes sense. And independently of these, any spell could have its own independent MP cost and time cost to balance it out. You have multi and single target attacks. You have multi-hit and single hit attacks. So some might be like, okay, they do 2 to 4 hits. And then there's some random damage associated with that. And then the ranged and melee thing. Ranged, the idea I have was that it would be not hindered by minions if they summon them. So let's say you have a bunch of snakes here under this guy. A ranged attack would not be hindered by them. So then I needed some detriment or penalty for attacking an enemy with a bunch of minions. Well, what I came up with was that you lose extra time on the battle clock if you attack into a group of minions. Okay, that's okay for melee attacks. You run up, you have to fight through all the guys, and it takes extra time to execute that move. So range gets over that. I didn't want all ranged attacks to be just like totally superior to their equivalent melee attacks, which I could balance with costing more MP for magic attacks that are ranged, but then you want physical attacks that are ranged. Maybe they could cost more time, like maybe it costs a lot of time to knock and fire an arrow or whatever, but that doesn't feel like a great solution. So what I came up with instead was having ranged attacks have their own penalty for attacking somebody with a lot of minions, and I think instead of having penalty on the battle clock, they might just be less accurate. So taking all of those properties together, I can really, now that I've broken down the anatomy of a skill, I can assemble new attacks and have a range of things that different enemies can get when they level up, like different levels of damage, ranger, melee, multi-target or single target, multi-hit or single hit, an element, a melee type, different MP costs and time costs, and secondary effects. Like this is just in the code for the ability of Fireball. Another thing I've changed, if I look at this buff defensive stance here, all right, so it activates this right now. Oh, okay, that happened again. These buffs only last for 3 turns. So I added a countdown on each of the buffs. And they get reset if you reapply them, but a buff doesn't reapply a debuff, if that makes sense. So, like, it can counteract, but it won't reset the timer. So, I guess you can tell, I mean, by the wheel, I just put that in last minute before this video, popping up here and going farther instead of, like, going back, because I have a function that makes it go back, but I don't have any code that calls it, so it just calls moving it up again. It's right now currently a bit sloppy and messy, and I have a lot of work to do, but my ideas of what the game is are consolidating in a more clear way, and we're working on adding things into the game that make it more readable and usable and flexible. So that's about it, but I'm back on track for this month. This is only like the past week of work because the month before that was pretty much written off as being so busy, but I'm back into it and did a lot of work on it this week. And yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for your patience if you were waiting to hear from me, and I'll see you soon.